So, there was a time when Khamzat Chimaev would be hyped up as the first potential triple champion due to him absolutely smashing his opponents. Nowadays, the hype around Khamzat Chimaev just isn't the same. So what happened? Let's go back to 2020. Every major sports organization is shut down due to the besides the UFC, who are in Abu Dhabi and putting on big fights. It was around this time, or in July the 15th to be specific, where a little known Khamzat Chimaev made his debut in the UFC. It was a great performance and he choked out his opponent in the second round, with his opponent only landing one strike. Only 10 days later he would appear on the UFC Fight Night Whittaker vs Till. This time again he would absolutely destroy his opponent with a TKO in the first round. This time Khamzat would land 40 strikes and his opponent would land 0. This was actually the fastest turnaround in the UFC history, and I still believe it is. After that record he made headlines in the MMA world. It was also around this time that I personally started hearing about him. After that he went on to fight Gerald Meerschaert, aka GM3, aka The GOAT. But The GOAT wasn't trying that day. All jokes aside though, Khamzat Chimaev knocked him out with the first punch he threw. At this point, I was fully in on Khamzat as a fan. I had looked up his wrestling achievements and I saw he was a multiple time Swedish champion, and I even think he took silver in the Russian Junior Championships. The problem with Khamzat at this point was that he hadn't faced a ranked opponent or an opponent of significant skill. He had basically only fought trash cans besides GM3, the GOAT. So after a while, it was time for him to fight Li Jingliang, aka the Leech. And this was Khamzat's test to see if he could ragdoll a ranked opponent. Needless to say, it was an absolute success for Khamzat as he picked up Li Jingliang and choked him out in the first round right in front of Dana White's bald head. Khamzat was at this point a superstar. People liked him for the way he fought, but also for his personality. A lot of fighters from that part of the world are a lot more humble and respectful towards their opponents. Khamzat was always talking big on the mic, and I think it contributed to his fame. People started comparing him to Khabib, and they even started calling him Evil Khabib due to his trash talk. After this fight, a lot of people thought Khamzat was champion material. However, Khamzat still hadn't fought a real top contender yet, but it was time. Khamzat would face his big test when he fought Gilbert Burns. Up to this point, there was something mysterious about Khamzat. Could he ragdoll a legitimate top contender in Gilbert Burns, or would he get fraud checked? In the first round, Khamzat came out and took Gilbert to the ground, but you could see he was a lot more competitive on the ground. He wasn't able to keep it there for too long. Regardless, Khamzat had great success as he was able to drop Gilbert with a southpaw jab in the first round. In the second round, the fight became a war. Gilbert had great success and he knocked him down 2 times. At the end of this round, you could see that both fighters were gassed, but anyone could tell Khamzat was more gassed. The third round came along and this round was a bit controversial. Khamzat landed more, but Gilbert landed some hard shots on him too. At the end, both of them were completely gassed, but Khamzat literally had 0 steam left in him. The judges gave the fight to Khamzat, but the decision was extremely controversial. A lot of people thought Gilbert won that fight. Khamzat won, but something he lost was the aura of how good is this guy really, if you know what I'm saying. Before, people thought he might have been able to maul these top contenders. Now that bubble of mystery was busted. Khamzat showed that he was a top contender at welterweight and that he could hang with the cream of the crop. But he also showed his obvious weaknesses in his game, like his weak cardio and his fight IQ. If he would have used his wrestling more in that fight, he could have won without it being that close. Next up was his fight against Nate Diaz. And as a big Nate Diaz fan, I had nightmares about this fight, I'm not gonna lie to y'all. Khamzat, however, missed weight by 7.5 pounds, and all of a sudden, the fans turned against him, and rightfully so. It was extremely unprofessional. However, I will say this, he basically saved the card. Instead of Khamzat fighting Nate, he fought Kevin Holland, and instead of Nate fighting Khamzat, he fought Tony Ferguson. This saved the card, let's not lie. No one wanted to see Khamzat absolutely run through Nate Diaz, man. Anyways, Khamzat absolutely rolled Kevin Holland in the first round by submission, and the fight was actually entertaining despite it being so short. Khamzat got to show his great wrestling as he literally was spinning around on Kevin Holland. After the fight, Khamzat got on the mic and said the usual stuff, you know, smash everybody, kill everybody, and the fans usually like that, but this time they booed. Khamzat had turned a lot of fans against him by that weight miss. Now this is where we get into the killing of his own hype. From the Kevin Holland fight, we would wait over a year until we got to see him in the octagon again. There are a lot of different theories to this. Some people believed it was due to some injury that he didn't want to disclose. Some believe he was doing a test weight cut down to welterweight in order to see if he could make the weight. However, I believe it was due to visa issues from hanging around a certain someone during a situation that was and is still taking place in Eastern Europe. This of course lost him a lot of fans. One of the things that made Khamzat so special was that he came up in the UFC as the guy who would fight 2 times during 10 days. It was activity, and him being out for a year lost him that. During this time, Khamzat would also call out people on Twitter that he was in no position to fight. A lot of fans, including myself, thought this was very annoying. Instead of calling out someone that made sense, he would call out like Jerry or Pereira, despite him not even fighting at light heavyweight. At last, we would see him fight in Abu Dhabi against Paulo Costa. And there was a lot of backstory to this fight. They had an altercation at the UFC gym a while back. However, close to the fight, Costa would pull out due to staph infection on his arm. Luckily, Usman would step in on very short notice. And I'm not gonna lie, this was a fight I was looking forward to. Former champion Usman against Khamzat Chimaev. We would finally see if Khamzat was champion level. However, it needs to be noted that Usman was at this point a former shell of himself. In the first round, Khamzat managed to get Usman to the ground and took his back, which was a little insane because we hadn't really seen Usman getting out wrestled like that before. And Khamzat was actually pretty close to finishing that fight a couple times in that round, but he never got the submission. In the second round, Khamzat was already completely gassed. And that round was like very close. A lot of people actually thought Usman won that round. I don't even remember when I watched it, but it was very close. And the third round was also very close, as Khamzat was completely gassed. They ended up giving the fight to Khamzat, but again, a lot of people thought Usman won that fight. Aside from the first round, the fight was very lackluster. It wasn't really much going on. Considering Usman was mostly a former shell of himself who took the fight on like a week's notice, it wasn't very impressive from Khamzat, who had a whole training camp. But again, he hops back on Twitter to call out people he's in no position to fight. After the Usman fight, Khamzat lost me as a fan. You can't be out for over a year and have 1 round cardio, man. Plus, putting on such a lackluster performance on a washed Usman is absolutely terrible, man. Pretty unforgivable. Ultimately, Khamzat is killing, or should I say smashing, his career by being inactive. He came up as the guy who was known for his activity and entertaining fights, which fans appreciated. But all of a sudden, he started being inactive and arguably losing to Usman, who took the fight on 1 week's notice, when he himself had an entire year to prepare. It also didn't help that he missed weight against Nate Diaz and that he annoyingly calls out people he's in no position to fight. Don't get me wrong, Khamzat is still a big name, but he certainly doesn't have the same hype as he did when he was on the come up. And it's honestly his own fault. Now, we recently got it confirmed that Khamzat is fighting Whittaker in June. This is his chance to reclaim his hype. If he destroys Whittaker and looks absolutely unstoppable, then goes and has another fight before the year ends, he can restore the hype. And if he beats Whittaker, I think he's definitely deserving of a title shot. Because you have to fight an actual top contender before you get a title shot, man. You can't be out here putting out razor sharp decisions against a washed Usman, man. Thank you for watching. Leave a like, subscribe, comment, and share to friends and family. And I'll see you guys in the next video. Goodbye.